So welcome back. We will continue from where we left off, that basically where the deposit was being sent by the customer, where they approved the estimate and which involved a deposit amount to be paid. And as you can recall on the last video, on the accounting tab in the invoice and billing, there is a new tab called deposit. And over here, there you can see that there are two rows, invoicing status and billing status. So on the invoicing status, much similar to the invoicing to the customer and other tabs that we have over here, invoicing status is pertaining to the customer invoices, billing status pertaining to the vendor bills. So over here, you can see already two greens over here marked on the job that we are working on, 823. The system created and sent deposit to the customer. The next in step for the invoicing is enter the customer invoice in QuickBooks and the deposit being paid. These two are interchangeable, doesn't matter on the sequence, but you can mark the deposit as paid before entering into QuickBooks or the invoice being entered into QuickBooks first. And on the billing status, it has the vendor deposit is marked as yes, that is, it requires a deposit. Rest of the action is pending. So we can enter enter the invoice into QuickBooks or mark the deposit as paid by our old in the similar ways that we used to do. And in here as well, there is a new button called Enter Customer Invoice to QuickBooks. And it will simply take you to the invoice screen that you previously used to manually push QuickBooks to the manually push the invoice to the QuickBooks or mark the deposit as paid. Before I mark it, I will just like to show that there are other options from where you used to go from. Basically, if you go to the jobs tab and invoice and estimate, and there is against this invoice, there is this accounting button, and it will bring you back to the same place basically. So in here as well, if you go to the customer, whichever method you prefer, so you can use that. If you go to the customer list as well and pull up the customer in question right now and go to job history, and it shows the all jobs, but we go to the unpaid jobs over here. We load the unpaid jobs, and you can also sort it to the job ID or PO number to go directly to the job, the invoices. Now, as you can see, there are two invoices against this. One is for deposit, which is of 2,000 amount, and the remaining amount of 4,600, which is the main invoice basically of the total amount of the job. So what we would need to do is actually mark this deposit as paid. Go to mark as paid. Mark this as, oh, you'll need to enter the check number. So let's say HQ mark as paid. Select okay now. Sorry. So once I enter this check number and credit number, it will pay the corresponding vendor bill. One thing that on the last screen I came in pretty quickly, that this is pertaining to the vendor bill corresponding to it. And as you can see, this is invoice number with a D for deposit and the corresponding vendor deposit that is required. So we can do that from here, but intentionally let's not let's skip this step for the time being to show you some of the other steps that are going to it's going to be useful for to know the sequence actually. So let's not deposit this right now. We will just close it, go to home page, and you can see that this is still in the customer response that is accepted invoice. And we will go to the accounting page and show you on the deposit. As you can see, the deposit has been paid. And we can now also from the same page go to the enter and manually enter go to the same invoicing page and mark press this button of invoice manually push to QuickBooks reference number as you do it usually. So we will do that. So 823 and as as you're aware that this actually pushes the entire uh, invoice total to the QuickBooks as instructed by Melody and Teresa, that the entire invoice amount of the job is actually uh, sent to the QuickBooks. And you can see that the deposit has been paid is marked, but not the invoice paid. So although the entire all the entire invoice amount is entered, the total amount is entered into QuickBooks, but the paid amount on the app is for the deposit, not the invoice total. And the balance of the remaining is shown clearly over here, which can be referred back. So let's go back over here and go back to home. And now you can see on the service side, and you can see this button over here. This job becomes highlighted on the service side when the deposit is paid and pushed to QuickBooks. And this is the request deposit payment to vendor. There's a new button over here. And one thing I also want to show you just on the side, that when the customer invoice of the deposit amount was created, a vendor bill of that is a corresponding vendor bill was also created. So this is basically the vendor bill that is over there for the deposit amount for the vendor. So go back to the dashboard and we will request deposit payment to vendor. From the service side, it basically puts up a request to the accounting person. So says by sending this request. So if there is any additional note, please. So with this note, you can send to the accounting in charge, in this case, Melody. So on our test server, it's Nahid, of course. So we'll just check it. Email that goes. And this is the email that is received by Melody. Please note that on the top is basically the customer invoice with the customer deposit of $2,000 is noted. And the corresponding vendor bill is noted below that. And at the bottom is the deposit due now upon approval of this, basically. So if you click approve, so this basically gives a confirmation that $1,500 deposit amount to the vendor has been approved by the admin. So come back from there. And if we reload the dashboard, you can see here, as you can see that on the dashboard, the highlight and the button is now gone. So if we go to the accounting and deposit grid once again, you'll find against 823 that the request for admin approval is done. And there is a button now for vendor bill entered in the QuickBooks, which this wasn't there. And if you hover on it, it will just give you a reminder that this is, although is a deposit, confirmation of deposit to the in the QuickBooks, but it will send the entire invoice or estimate amount as an invoice to the QuickBooks, the total amount. So we will click there. It's working. So we can mark as VB paid and manually push to QuickBooks. This is for the vendor bill. And we can say that the vendor bill is paid. So this is by the method of payment, pay by check or credit card. And now if we go to the accounting grid once again, deposit. And you can see all those things are green now. So this concludes the third step of our demonstration. We'll continue on the next video of the next steps that needs to be done from the service side.